For the best part of a decade, the first question that came to many when thinking about Dead Island 2 was, is it a real game?
I would hope so. A lot of people have played it. It is 100% a real game.
It is a real game.
It's definitely a real game. It's definitely a real game.
Dead Island 2's development cycle is infamous at this point. Initially revealed in 2014, its journey has been almost as treacherous as a runner trying to make it along Venice Beach in the midst of a zombie outbreak. Two studios tried to put a sequel together, but were met with little more than a gory disaster.
Spec Ops: The Line developer Jaeger has officially been removed from the creation of Dead Island 2.
Dead Island 2 has found its new developer. Could this be the one?
But while those projects died, hope did not, and so the reins were handed to the team at Dambuster Studios.
This is a game that's been round the houses, semi-cancelled like a couple of times. Is that a bit of a poison chalice?
2 false starts, right? We didn't want to announce vaporware. We didn't just want to come out with a CGI and then have people go, well, is there really a game?
Over the course of 9 years and 3 developers, the long-awaited zombie-killing sequel has kept running or walking on, and now it is finally at the finish line.
This is one we've all been waiting a long time for.
This is the inside story of how Dead Island 2 was brought back from the dead.
Hit them till they stop biting.
The Dead Island 2 we're playing today is unapologetically pulpy, a straightforward homage to B-movie horror that builds on the tone established in the 2011 original. It's both a love letter to the zombie genre and a bite back against the more human-centric stories that have dominated it more recently. Since the release of its predecessor, zombie games such as The Last of Us, The Walking Dead and Days Gone have focused more on the complexities of humanity in post-apocalyptic worlds than the simple pleasure of taking on the undead headfirst with a hatchet. Despite respecting the stories that those games have to tell, the team at developer Dambuster Studios is much more interested in the latter. For them, there's little more satisfying than the simple thrill of punching a zombie in the face and seeing your fist crunching through the back of its skull.
I think we really just wanted to focus the attention back on the zombies. I think over the years, recent years with say like Walking Dead for example, which was a massively popular series, the attention I think had moved definitely more to humans and humanity and that sort of post-apocalyptic survival, getting through the trauma of the outbreak. I mean, those stories have been told, right?
I think they've done a really good job of it in The Last of Us and stuff like that, where they've kind of balanced that so the combat and the violence does feel really brutal in a way that is quite realistic. But that's a different thing to what Dead Island 1 was, and it was a different thing to what we wanted to do. We wanted to make it fun, basically. Make all the violence fun, rather than make you sad.
Before Dambuster was granted the opportunity to execute their vision, however, the story of Dead Island 2 was a sad one. Almost a decade of troubled development led to a moment few saw coming, a grand re-reveal at Gamescom 2022. It was an exciting time for the studio to showcase what they'd been working so hard and so quietly on, but one that came with its fair share of nerves. How would it be received? Did people even care about Dead Island 2 anymore?
We got one more game for you tonight at Gamescom opening night live.
Torture being on at the end, all these fantastic games coming on before us, but we knew that we were kind of closing the show there.
Up until that point, you are always kind of asking yourself, well, I think it's fun, but I don't know how that's going to kind of pan out when we give it to other people.
This is one we've all been waiting a long time for.
The Dead Island 2 reveal that day was nothing more than a pipe dream back in 2011, the year the original game was released. Developed by Polish studio Techland, Dead Island placed the focus firmly on butchering its plentiful hordes of zombies in creative ways with satisfying melee combat.
Once I started turning kitchen knives into electrified instruments of death, I was sold.
A huge commercial hit, it sold over 5 million copies in its first 2 years and nurtured a passionate fanbase thanks to its over-the-top violence and echoes of classic zombie cinema.
Had it on pre-order, bought it, loved it, played it with friends. You know, it had such a charm at the time. I can't remember playing anything like it.
I think Dead Island 1 was a little bit sort of lightning in a bottle. One of my favourite zombie movies is Zombie Flesh Eaters from Lucio Fulci, and that had that kind of desert island, beach vibe. Dead Island 1 definitely evoked that fantasy for me.
The success of the original naturally paved the road for a sequel, but from the very beginning, the follow-up was in an odd position. Techland and publisher Deep Silver had conflicting ideas about the creative direction of a second game, a disagreement that saw Techland take their zombies elsewhere and start work on a brand new zombie game, Dying Light. And so when Deep Silver revealed Dead Island 2 at E3 2014, it came with the surprise announcement that it would not be developed by the series creator. Instead, German studio Jaeger Development of Spec Ops: The Line fame would helm the sequel, with a brand new studio, Jaeger Productions, created purely to work on Dead Island 2. But the change in developer wasn't the thing everyone was talking about.
Okay, wake up in the morning to the clear blue sky. Turn up the music when I hop in the ride. The windows.
Dead Island 2 was revealed via one of video games' most memorable trailers, a slapstick stroll with the undead along Los Angeles' iconic Venice Beach.
Kind of gives a whole new meaning to the term fresh kicks, right?
It made a splash, to say the least, winning IGN's award for Best E3 2014 trailer at the time, and sticking long enough in the memory to have been parodied as recently as 2022 by Goat Simulator 3.
I thought it was fantastic. It was a great piece of footage as well that really captured the imagination of what Dead Island 2 could be.
It was a great trailer, and it carried on that Dead Island tradition of great trailers. You know, the first one was very striking. The one set in LA was striking, but the thing that, as a creative and a narrative specialist, I was really struck by the change in tone, and that kind of really appealed to me.
We were actually at E3 at the same time as Dead Island 2 was being shown, and again, like, I had no notion that these years later I'd actually be, you know, at the helm working on that sequel.
The excitement was palpable, and things were looking bright for the series. Dead Island 2 was set to build on what players loved from the original, an expanded 8-player co-op campaign, a huge range of weaponry, a plethora of zombie types, a more comedic tone, and yes, lots and lots of blood. In the months that followed, dozens of video game journalists went hands-on with Dead Island 2 at PAX and Gamescom 2014.
We played Dead Island 2.
Sure did. I really thought having a new developer on it and new tech from PlayStation 4, which we were playing on, I was hoping it would be more solid from the get-go.
Obviously it's brutal, much like it was in the original game. Really, really gory, but it's a lot slicker.
IGN was among them, and our preview infused that Dead Island 2 finally looks to deliver on the promise made by the blood-soaked trailer. Sadly, and frustratingly though, that promise wouldn't be delivered on anytime soon.
Spec Ops: The Line developer Jaeger has officially been removed from the creation of Dead Island 2.
Dead Island 2 was scheduled to release in spring 2015, but by the summer of that year, there was still no sign of it at all, despite it having been playable at multiple game conventions. And in July, Dead Island 2's first major disaster was made public. Jaeger Productions had severed ties with the project after 3 years of development.
This is an interesting move. This is a game we haven't heard about a lot in a while. It skipped E3, now we know why.
In an interview with Games Industry, Jaeger managing director Timo Ullman spoke of a situation that echoed the fallout between Deep Silver and series creator Techland just a few years prior. He said, "The team worked with enthusiasm to take Dead Island 2 to a new level of quality. However, Jaeger and Deep Silver's respective visions of the project fell out of alignment, which led to the decision that has been made. Jaeger Productions would file for insolvency just weeks later." Despite this major setback though, Deep Silver kept faith in Dead Island 2.
The original Dead Island developer Techland released open-world zombie survival game Dying Light earlier this year, but no confirmation as to whether they or any other development studio will step in to helm Dead Island 2 has been made.
This is not the first time this has ever happened.
It's not the first time it's happened at Deep Silver in the last 365 days. They fired a team and then built their own to make Homefront the Revolution.
That's true.
I have to imagine Deep Silver will put the Homefront team on this to finish it. There's no way that this far into this game's development they stop, they throw the code out, and they start over. This is a game that is like so far in, I feel like you just finish it.
It wasn't to be the turn of Dambuster just yet though. The search began for a new developer, and in March 2016, it was announced that Sumo Digital was taking its turn to have their crack at breathing new life into the still warm corpse.
Dead Island 2 has found its new developer, Little Big Planet 3 developer Sumo Digital. Could this be the one?
A UK-based studio known mostly at the time for sports games and Little Big Planet 3, it was a surprising match to say the least. Still, Deep Silver assured that things were going smoothly at Sumo Studio in Sheffield, although very little else was being said publicly. Meanwhile, in May of 2016, down the road in Nottingham, the team at Dambuster was navigating through a difficult time in their own history, following the disappointing reception of Homefront: The Revolution, their ambitious, but ultimately flawed, first-person shooter.
While it has a lot of interesting ideas, Homefront: The Revolution fails to deliver a satisfying or even fully functional shooter experience.
That game, I think it's fair to say, didn't launch in the state that we would have really wanted. It was a complex game, it was an ambitious game, there were lots of emergent systems at play in it, and finding the fun of the game, you know, the kind of simulation of it, came quite late, I think, in the development of Homefront.
Obviously, that game didn't launch in as good a way as we'd hoped, and it was, I think, disappointing for everybody who'd been working on it for quite some time. So we were trying to figure out what direction the studio was going to go in, and we'd sort of prototyped a bunch of stuff.
As a studio, we were regrouping, we were rebuilding. We'd moved from CryEngine to Unreal Engine, so it was new tech for us as well. We'd lost a lot of good people, so we were bringing in fresh talent, and with that fresh ideas and fresh knowledge of tools.
The years following Homefront's release was a tough learning period for Dambuster. After Homefront's multi-layered ambitions fell short, the studio recognised that a narrow, focused vision would be key to a comeback success. Learning from the errors of its ways, the first thing that Dambuster vowed to do when starting work on a new project, whatever that was to be, was finding the fun straight away. That fun was found in a prototype for the incredibly gross and gory, fully locational evisceration system for humanoids, more catchily known as Flesh.
We'd been working on the Flesh system and the gore tech. It was only like super early stuff. All of the prototypes we were doing were sort of, you know, they had some kind of concept behind them. I think this was the one that went furthest, and it was a zombie themed game.
What was Dambuster going to make? What kind of games do we want to make? But the Flesh engine and that kind of exploration really started to make people excited. There was still a lot of soul searching, I guess, at that point. What does a gore engine mean for a game, and how do you add something to that so it doesn't just become like a corpse mashing simulation?
Dambuster had crafted a fun core, but it needed a game, and that game would arrive in the form of Sumo Digital's quiet departure from Dead Island 2 in 2018. With no further sightings of the game for years by that point, rumours had rumbled on that the zombie smasher may never see the light of day again, despite repeated statements to the contrary from Deep Silver.
Dead Island 2, a game that was announced half a decade ago and has since gone through numerous development setbacks, is apparently still being worked on.
I was only 8 years old when it got announced.
Wow.
Fun fact, a logo for Dead Island 2 confirms it's still coming to PC, PS4, and Xbox One, but no other new information was revealed.
Of course, we've been staying tuned for 5 years now.
But in 2019, the publisher broke its silence and publicly revealed that history had repeated itself, and Sumo had become Dead Island 2's latest victim.
Another one bites the dust.
No explanation for why the developer left the project was offered, and Sumo's own vision for Dead Island 2 remains a mystery. Plagued by development issues that had now seen not only one but two different studios divorced from the project, it would indeed now be the turn of Dambuster Studios to try and get the sequel into the hands of players. It was an exciting challenge for the studio, looking to put their freshly prototyped gore system into play, but a challenge nonetheless.
Obviously, there's a certain amount of trepidation of like, well, this is a game that's been round the houses, semi-cancelled like a couple of times. Is that a bit of a poisoned chalice?
I mean, you're kind of contemplating that kind of thing, I suppose, like very early on. It just comes with the sort of pressure of the franchise, right? It's a very popular franchise. There's a fan base that are really dedicated and passionate about it, and obviously you want to do it justice.
You always worry, you know, if there's been a few missteps or creative relationships have broken down with those missteps kind of thing. But Deep Silver were really keen to just give us the space to come up with what we wanted to do. We had a pretty good idea of what we wanted to do, you know, keep it laser focused, keep it simple. So yeah, we were just given the time and the space to do just that.
The fact that Dambuster had been working for some time on the Flesh system meant that it was immediately in a good position to hit the ground running with Dead Island 2. The team had the passion and the drive to make an undead smasher, even before such a massive IP had been offered to them.
So do you think if you hadn't started work on Dead Island 2, you
would have been making a zombie game anyway?
Quite possibly. Nothing was concrete at that point. When we heard that Dead Island 2 was maybe coming our way, and we had this sort of initial prototype that had, like I say, lots of elements that we could take across, we were like, well, that's great because it fits with what we've got.
I was brought in just after that decision. Dambuster showed me the Gore-Tech, and I just saw the Gore-Tech and the proposals for the way they wanted to switch the tone from the original Dead Island, and I thought, yeah, this is me. This is really, really good.
With their desire to make a zombie game already in full bloom, it appeared that the stars had aligned as Sumo's loss became Dambuster's gain. And so, sharing an office with zombies of efforts past, the team began work on Dead Island 2. The studio had a clear idea of what they wanted to do from the start: make the zombies, and specifically dispatching them as disgustingly as possible, the star of the show. And so, despite having playable builds of both Jaeger and Sumo's efforts available to them, the decision was made to rip it all up and start again.
I guess there were two different sort of takes on what Dead Island 2 was going to be, and we were able to play both of those, but it was never a realistic aim on our side to carry any of that forward. You know, we just had our own unique take on what our Dead Island 2 was going to be like.
Those builds were quite old by the time we got them, and in order to do the IP justice and to put out Dead Island 2 that the fans will appreciate, it was important for us to just do a fresh start.
And it wasn't necessarily the content or the tone or the stuff like that. I mean, it was, a lot of it was perhaps, you know, they took a too complex approach, maybe. I think this is a problem that's facing games in general, is just blossoming complexity. And it comes back to bite the studio when they're trying to get that game out the door. And so early on, when we just decided, right, no, just going to be people versus zombies, we've got a gore engine, we're going to make the combat really, really visceral and tactile and in your face.
On Homefront, like, I spent a long time working on like dynamic day-night cycle, dynamic weather system, and it took ages, but it made no difference to the game, really. It didn't make any difference to what you were playing minute to minute. And so I was really keen to put my efforts into something that I felt like was absolutely a core part of the game.
There were aspects of the previous versions of Dead Island 2 that Dambuster appreciated, but seeing as they were effectively starting all over again from scratch anyway, they stuck to their guns and decided on a singular, narrow vision, aiming to avoid the bloat that Homefront had succumbed to, but also wary of not falling foul of the same errors their predecessor studios had. For example, Dambuster settled on a 3-player co-op, whereas Jaeger's original vision back in 2014 was to have 8-player.
We definitely had to evaluate what was there and kind of go, which features do we want to have in the game, you know? And certainly there were some interesting ideas that we looked at from previous iterations of the game that didn't make it in, but primarily sort of for scope reasons and trying to get the project done in like a reasonable time frame. There was some vehicle stuff, like driving cars, things like that, where it was certainly interesting what we saw, but in terms of the level design and keeping levels sort of at the scale where the hand-to-hand melee combat works, you design a level differently if you're driving around it.
We had discussions of Catalina Island, which is just off, you know, the Californian coast. We thought about that as a location, but that Hollywood lens and the picture postcard, it's about delivering that familiarity, and people the world over are familiar with that Los Angeles through the Hollywood lens, through the TV series, etc.
Originally, it was the whole of California, I think, like, or at least there were going to be bits in different areas of California, and that had been already sort of scaled down to LA. That was pretty much non-negotiable. In terms of the tone, that kind of went a few ways. We had to kind of, I guess, figure out exactly where we wanted it to land. I think it's landed fairly close to that Dead Island 2 trailer.
Dead Island is known for those Paradise Gone to Hell locations, and we wanted to make sure that we doubled down on that. We wanted to make sure we doubled down, tripled down, maybe even on zombies at the core, right? To just really go to town on as many zombies as we could put together.
I think we expected that obviously people are going to have preconceived ideas about what Dead Island 2 is going to be. They're going to have preconceived ideas about, well, it's been in development for 10 years, and so, you know, therefore it's going to either be like a total disaster or it's going to be this absolutely enormous behemoth of a game that just has everything in it. And in actual fact, what we've done with it, obviously we weren't developing it for 10 years, so we didn't have that time to make a huge game. And I think one of the things that we learnt from Homefront was that you need to be focused on what you're doing and you need to choose a few things and do them really, really well.
It was that laser focus on being best in class first-person combat. In fairness to the team, it was really something that genuinely we've had right the way from day one, right the way from those very early prototypes of the flesh system, the weapons and the enemies, and it wasn't based on a trailer, it wasn't based on a storyboard, it was based on gameplay and the fantasy of hacking apart zombies and melting zombies in the most spectacular, gory, groundbreaking ways possible.
From late 2018 to the summer of 2022, the creation of that grotesque, pulpy and violent fantasy quietly took place behind the firmly closed doors of Dambuster. Not a single screenshot, video clip or even quote was released to the public. A conscious decision made by the studio to allow themselves to get their heads down and work with as little outside interference as possible.
It's partly because we knew of with the history of the franchise, it's been such a long wait for players, and we knew that there'd been a couple of false starts before, so this time we really better make sure that we've got something awesome to play, something awesome to show, absolutely just prove once and for all when it's announced this time it's real, it's super close to launch, it's coming soon, you can play it.
2 false starts, right? We didn't want to announce vaporware. We didn't just want to come out with a CGI and then have people go, well, is there really a game?
Obviously, knowing you're working on it and you're reading kind of online of has it been cancelled, and then obviously it hadn't.
It can be challenging to read those kind of comments and sit on your hands and not give any hints or any indication, because as a studio you're investing your heart and soul and blood, sweat and tears into the project, and you have been doing for a while. Players obviously have got absolutely no inkling about that, and yeah, it can be tricky. You get impatient, right?
All right. We got one more game for you tonight at Gamescom Opening Night Live, and this is one we've all been waiting a long time for.
And so, we find ourselves back in 2022, when that silence was broken in the final moments of Gamescom's Opening Night Live. Dead Island 2 made its very loud and very unexpected return from the dead, and to the team's relief, the trailer was met with a newfound hunger. The long-thought corpse of a game was finally reanimated. For Dambuster, it was a moment of pure relief, matched only by the excitement from the fanbase.
It was funny at Opening Night Live because we'd got actually Dead Island t-shirts that we weren't allowed to wear until the moment of the reveal. And obviously, you're super pensive at the point that it's all about to happen, but it's such a relief once it's out there, once everybody knows. And then finally, we're able to show what we've been working on for all of these years. It's just like releasing the pressure valve.
Want to see some gameplay?
I think we want to see some gameplay. You guys want to see the gameplay?
It is really nice to see people's reactions. People's kind of like shock at the gore system and everyone like kind of going like, oh man, bloody hell, but then also like laughing. It's really gruesome, but it's to the point that you just kind of have to laugh. Seeing people actually do that, play the game, whack a zombie in the head and then just start laughing because the gore is so ridiculous. You're kind of like, right, okay, yeah, we got that.
The re-reveal at Gamescom signalled the light at the end of the tunnel for the long-tortured sequel. Dead Island 2 would finally arrive in the spring of 2023, and thousands of zombies would once again die in all manner of experimentally violent ways. For the best part of a decade, the first question that came to many when thinking about Dead Island 2 was, is it a real game? But for the team at Dambuster, the question now is, what do they hope its lasting legacy will be?
I hope they remember that it was fun. As a designer, that's what I want to hear. Like, it was fun to engage with the setups, it was fun to kill the zombies, it was vibrant, it was pulpy, it was different, it didn't take itself too seriously, and it knew what it wanted to be.
I'm pretty confident that when this time next year players will see how it's re-injected a sense of vibrancy and purpose and real differentiation to the zombie genre.
Hopefully they'll think this is the game that has reinvigorated the zombie genre and taken it back to a place that is trashy, kind of pulpy, and lots of fun. That's what I wanted to do with it, and I feel like that's what we've done. We have succeeded where others have not, so yeah, that's nice too.
Well, I hope that they will think that Dead Island 2 wasn't such a simple undertaking. I think that was proven with the development cycle, but getting it right was worth the wait.
Dead Island 2 is definitely a real game, just not necessarily the same one that started life all those years ago. It's been a long decade for fans of the series. Studios may have fallen by the wayside like dismembered limbs, but neither the head was removed nor the brain destroyed. Dead Island 2 successfully imitated its own shambling hordes as the game that refused to die. I guess the only logical question to ask next then is Dead Island 3 a real game?
Nah. I read somewhere about that actually. I was like, someone speculating on it.
I don't know. I could not possibly comment.
Well, we'll have to see about that, won't we? I'm not allowed to say much.
No comment.
It hasn't been discovered yet at all until today. And the only person that's been able to do this is Sad Futaga.
The views are like going up like 10,000, 20,000, 300,000.
I my pants.